Dr. Whitfield didn't reach for his phone. He didn't call the nurse or raise his voice. He just set the folder down on the desk between us and looked at it like it might change if he looked away and back. 4 seconds passed, maybe 5. I've counted worse silences in my life, but never one sitting in a green vinyl chair with my grandson asleep against my arm. "Mr. Bishop," he said, and his voice had that careful flatness doctors use when they're deciding how much a man can hear at once. "How long has Tyler been taking these vitamins?" Tyler was 8 years old, and right then he was slumped against my shoulder the way he used to sleep as a baby, mouth open, breathing slow and heavy in the middle of a Wednesday afternoon in a pediatrician's office off Route 9 outside Scranton. Not resting, not tired from a long day at school. Out cold, the kind of sleep that has no business showing up at 3:40 in the afternoon. I looked down at his face, then back up at the doctor. "I don't know what vitamins you're talking about," I said. "That's the problem. Nobody told me he was taking anything at all." "Welcome, friends and neighbors, to the porch. Pull up a chair, because today I've got a story that still sits heavy on my chest, even months later. If you're new here, I'm just an old man who likes to tell the truth the way it happened. No dressing it up, no tearing it down. If it does something for you, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, and tell me where you're listening from. I read every one of them. Now let me take you back to where this whole thing started, because you need to understand how an ordinary Tuesday turned into the worst week of my life. My name is Walter Bishop. I'm 68 years old, retired now going on 6 years after 31 of them driving a delivery route for a regional grocery distributor, up and down the back roads of northeastern Pennsylvania, in every kind of weather God ever invented. My wife Carol passed 4 years ago this coming winter, breast cancer. And I won't dwell on that because that's a different story for a different day. What I will tell you is that after she died, my grandson Tyler became the reason I got out of bed most mornings. My son Marcus married Tyler's mother, a woman named Renee, about 6 years back. Tyler wasn't Marcus's by blood. Renee had him from a relationship before, but Marcus adopted him legally 2 years into the marriage, and as far as I'm concerned, that boy has been my grandson since the day I met him. Full stop. No asterisks. That Tuesday, the 11th of March, I'd driven out to their place in Clark's Summit to drop off a bicycle helmet I'd bought Tyler for his birthday, which had actually been the Saturday before. I'd missed the party itself on account of a bad bout of bronchitis that had me flat in bed for the better part of a week. The kind of thing that scares you a little more every year you get older. By the time I felt steady enough to drive, the balloons were down and the cake was long gone, and I felt about as low as a man can feel over missing a 7-year-old's, an 8-year-old's birthday party. So I loaded that helmet, still in its box, with a ribbon taped crooked around it, because I never could wrap a present worth a darn, and I drove the 22 minutes out to their house, determined to make it right. My plan was simple. Drop off the gift, take Tyler to the diner for a burger, let him tell me every detail about his party I'd missed, and just be his grandfather for an afternoon, 3 days late but present all the same. I pulled into the driveway around 1 in the afternoon. Renee answered the door with her phone wedged between her ear and shoulder, gave me a little wave and a look that said she was annoyed at the interruption, rather than glad to see me. "He's in his room," she said, already turning back toward the kitchen. "I've got a work call." I stood in that entryway a moment, holding the crooked bow on that helmet box, feeling exactly like what I was. An old man 3 days late, trying to buy back a birthday with a piece of cardboard and plastic. I went up the stairs, and Tyler's door had a paper sign taped to it that he'd made himself in purple marker. Tyler's room. Enter with permission, which always made me smile, because that boy has more manners at 8 than half the grown men I drove routes with for 30 years. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again, said his name soft. Finally I heard shuffling, slow, dragging, and the door opened, and something in my chest went cold and stayed that way. Tyler looked wrong. Not sick wrong, no fever flush, no runny nose. He looked heavy, like gravity had gotten stronger just for him. His eyes were half open and slow to focus, and when he saw me, his smile came a full 2 seconds after it should have, like the message had to travel further than it used to. "Hey, Pop," he said, and even his voice sounded like it was underwater. "Hey there, birthday boy," I said, keeping my tone light, crouching down the best my knees allow these days. Sorry I missed your big day, bud. You still celebrating a little? He nodded, slow, like his head weighed more than usual. I'm just really tired, he said. Tired, I repeated, and I glanced at my watch without meaning to. 1 in the afternoon on a school half-day, sure, but this wasn't a boy who'd been up too late. This was something else, and 31 years of driving pre-dawn routes taught me to trust a feeling in my gut before my head catches up to it. I stepped into his room and sat on the edge of his bed, gave him the helmet box. He took his time opening it, slower than any 8-year-old opens anything, and when he saw what it was, a real smile broke through, the kind that reminded me this was still my Tyler in there somewhere. It's got flames on it, he said, running his fingers along the decal. Can I wear it right now? Course you can. He put it on, sat there a second, admiring himself in the little mirror on his dresser, and then he went quiet, in a particular way. The way kids go quiet when they're building up the courage to say something they've been carrying around. He turned to me, both hands on my knee, and looked at me the way he only does when he wants to make sure nobody else in the house can hear him. Pop, pop, he whispered. Can you tell Mom to stop giving me the orange vitamin at night? It makes my legs feel weird, and I don't want to take it anymore. I want to tell you my heart didn't skip, but that would be a lie. Something cold moved straight through my chest and settled somewhere behind my ribs. I nodded, slow and steady, like he'd just told me his favorite color had changed. Okay, buddy, I said. I hear you. I stood up, held out my hand. How about we go get a burger, just us two? I need you to understand something about me before I go any further. I am not a man who jumps to conclusions. 31 years hauling freight through blizzards and heat waves. You learn patience the hard way. You learn to check twice before you act once. But I also learned to trust that feeling in your gut when the engine sounds wrong, even if you can't say exactly why yet. Something was wrong in that house, and I intended to find out what. We went downstairs. Renee was still on the phone in the kitchen, laughing at something, pacing back and forth with a coffee mug in her free hand. Taking Tyler out for lunch, I called out. She waved without turning around. Sure, fine, have fun. Didn't even look at him. I buckled Tyler into the back seat of my old Silverado, and instead of driving to the diner, I drove us to Dr. Whitfield's office on Route 9, the same pediatrician who'd seen Tyler for every checkup since he was a toddler, a man I trusted the way you trust very few doctors these days, because he always told you the truth, even when it was inconvenient. I hadn't called Marcus yet, hadn't called anybody. I needed to know what I was dealing with before I put that weight on my son's shoulders. At the front desk, I told them it was urgent, and something in my face must have convinced them, because they got us back within 15 minutes. I sat across from Dr. Whitfield and told him everything, word for word. The whisper, the heavy eyes, the slow way Tyler had moved all morning, like he was walking through water. He didn't brush me off, didn't give me the look I half expected, the one that says an old man is overreacting. He examined Tyler, who by then had curled up in the chair next to me and was working on a juice box like this was any ordinary Tuesday, and then Dr. Whitfield ordered a full blood panel and a urine screen, the works. We'll have results within the hour, he said. We waited. At about the 40-minute mark, Tyler climbed into my lap the way he hadn't done since he was 5 or 6, curled against my chest, and within a couple of minutes he was fast asleep again. Just like that, a switch flipped off. I sat very still in that chair and stared at a poster on the wall about hand washing, and I thought about how close I'd come to not driving out there at all that day. How easy it would have been to wait until the weekend when my chest felt better. How many more nights that orange vitamin might have gone down before anybody noticed. The door opened. Dr. Whitfield came back in holding a printout, and he looked at it, and then he looked at me, and he stopped in the doorway. 4 seconds, maybe 5. Then he asked me the question I told you about at the start of all this. How long has he been taking these vitamins? I told him I didn't even know what vitamins he meant. He sat down across from me and turned the paper so I could read it myself. Diphenhydramine, he explained, an antihistamine, the active ingredient in most children's allergy medicine, and plenty of over-the-counter sleep aids too. Perfectly safe at the correct pediatric dose for the correct reason. But the levels in Tyler's system, his exact words, were consistent with regular, repeated administration well beyond what any legitimate use would call for. Not a one-time accident. Not a mix-up. Repeated. I read that line 3 times before it settled into my bones. Is his mother home right now, Doctor? Whitfield asked, quiet. Yes. Mr. Bishop, I have to tell you, by law I'm required to report this. I understand that, I said, and I met his eyes straight on. I'm asking you for 24 hours. Please. He studied me a long moment, the way you size up a man before you decide whether to trust him with something serious. Whatever he saw in my face must have told him I wasn't going to drive back to that house and do something I'd regret. Tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, he finally said. If I haven't heard from you by then, I make the call myself, no exceptions. I shook his hand. Understood. If you've been sitting on this porch with me a while and you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, now's a fine time. Costs you nothing and it means a great deal to an old man who just likes telling stories. All right, let's keep going, because it gets harder before it gets better. I carried Tyler out to the truck, buckled him in with that new helmet still on his head because he wouldn't let me take it off, and I drove the whole way back to my place in Dunmore doing the exact speed limit. No radio, just my own thoughts organizing themselves the way they do on a long haul. 31 years behind the wheel teaches you something about silence. It does the sorting for you, if you let it. I thought about that helmet box, with its crooked bow. 3 days of guilt I'd carried over a missed birthday party, when the whole time something far worse than a missed party had been happening under that roof. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was falling apart. I want to be clear about that. I don't fall apart. I sat in my recliner with the lamp low, and a cup of coffee going cold beside me, and I thought it through the way I used to think, through a route when the weather turned bad. What did I know? What did I still need to find out? What was the right order to do it in? What I knew was that my grandson had been drugged, repeatedly, inside his own home, by someone who was supposed to be looking out for him. What I didn't know was how long, how far it went, and most of all, why. That last question kept me up till nearly 4 in the morning. Wednesday, 6:45. I called Marcus. Not to tell him everything, not yet. I needed to hear his voice first, take his temperature before I handed him something that was going to knock the floor out from under him. He picked up on the second ring, already sounded awake. Hey, Dad, everything all right? Everything's fine, son. Just thinking about Tyler. He seem okay to you lately? Anything different? A pause, longer than a casual one. The kind that means a man is actually turning the question over in his head, instead of just answering out of habit. He's been sleeping a lot, actually. Renee says it's probably a growth spurt. Another pause. Why, Dad, what's going on? Growth spurt, I said, keeping my voice easy. No reason. Just missed his party and been thinking about him. Listen, would it be all right if he stayed with me a few days? I feel bad about missing the big day, want to make it up to him. I could hear the relief in his voice, like he was glad for a simple, happy request after that strange pause. He'd love that, Dad. Let me run it by Renee. I hung up and sat with that a minute. Growth spurt. My son had looked his own boy in the face, heavy-eyed, dragging through the afternoons, and filed it away under growth spurt because his wife told him that's all it was. That's not a bad father, I told myself. That's a man wearing a blindfold he didn't choose. I needed to hold on to that distinction because it was going to matter later. By 9 that morning, I was sitting in the office of a lawyer named Sam Ferris, a man I'd known since he handled Carol's estate paperwork years back, a fellow who doesn't waste words and doesn't flinch easy. I laid it all out for him. The visit, Dr. Whitfield's findings, photographs I'd taken of the test results on my phone. He read through everything without a word for a good 3 minutes, then set his glasses down on the desk. Walter, you understand what you might be looking at here, he said. I think I do. Child endangerment at minimum, and depending on what else comes out, it could be a great deal more serious than that. He asked who else knew. I told him. The doctor. Him. Nobody else. Not Marcus yet? Not yet. He nodded slow, approving. Good. Before you tell your son anything, you want this locked down tight, because when a man hears something like this about his own wife, his first instinct is going to be denial. You want the proof so solid that denial isn't an option he can reach for. He was right, and I knew it the moment he said it. He told me what I'd need. Medical records, which I had. Pharmacy records if we could trace the purchases. A clear timeline, and eyes on that house. He slid a card across the desk before I'd even asked. Frank Delgado, private investigator, worked out of Scranton, mostly insurance fraud and custody cases. But Sam said the man was thorough and, more importantly, quiet. "One more thing," Sam said as I stood to leave. "When your son calls back about Tyler staying with you, say yes right away and get that boy out of the house as soon as you possibly can." "Already planning on it," I told him. He almost smiled. "You've done something like this before?" "No," I said, "but I spent 31 years learning how to fix things nobody thought could be fixed." Marcus called back around 11. "Renee was fine with it," he said. "Thought some time with Grandpa might do Tyler good. Get him some fresh air. Didn't ask how long. Didn't ask what we'd be doing. Didn't even get on the line herself to say goodbye to her own son." I filed that away too. I drove out to Clark's Summit that afternoon, and Tyler was waiting at the door with a backpack, his new helmet still perched on his head, and Renee was nowhere in sight, somewhere in the back of the house. He seemed a shade brighter than the day before, a little more himself, whether from one night away from that orange vitamin, or just being out of that house. I couldn't say for certain, but I noticed it. "Are we having an adventure, Pop-Pop?" he asked me on the drive. "The best kind," I told him. And I meant that in more ways than he understood yet. Now, I want to be fair about Renee, because fairness matters even when your blood is running hot. Maybe especially then. She'd had a rough start in life. Grew up in a small town outside Wilkes-Barre with a mother who struggled with addiction, clawed her way through community college and then a nursing degree, built herself a good career, a nice house, a life that looked, from the outside, like she'd outrun everything she came from. When she met Marcus, she was 29 and driven and impressive, and I liked her plenty at the start. I want to be honest about that too. But somewhere along the way, and none of us saw it happen, the life she'd built for herself stopped feeling like something she'd earned and started feeling like something she had to maintain, a performance she couldn't step out of. Marcus traveled too, sometimes 3 weeks a month for his job in industrial sales. And Tyler was a bright, loud, curious kid the way healthy 8-year-olds are. And somewhere in that big, quiet house, Renee had started feeling like the walls were closing in on her. I'm not saying that excuses one single thing she did to that boy. I'm saying I understand there's a difference between cruelty and desperation, though I'd soon learn that desperate people are plenty capable of cruel things too. Frank Delgado called me Thursday evening, said he had something, and asked could I meet him. I was at the truck stop diner off Interstate 81 in 18 minutes flat. He was a stocky fellow, quiet eyes, the sort of man you'd walk right past in a grocery store without a second glance, which I imagine serves him well in his line of work. He ordered black coffee and slid a manila folder across the table without much ceremony. I opened it. Photographs, clean and time-stamped. Renee and a man I didn't recognize, tall, expensive haircut, the kind of easy confidence you only get from a life that's never handed you much resistance. A receipt from a hotel off the interstate, another from a place downtown, dates that lined up, and I checked them myself against every stretch. Marcus had been away for work. The man's name, according to Frank's notes, was Craig Halloran, 41, worked in commercial real estate. "How long?" I asked. Frank wrapped both hands around his mug. "Best I can confirm, going on 10 months. 10 months. Tyler had just turned 8. I did the arithmetic in my head and didn't care much for where it landed. "What about the boy?" I said. Frank looked at me steady. Nothing to suggest he was ever in danger from the boyfriend directly. But the timeline on the vitamin, when it started, lines up close with when the affair picked up in frequency. She needed more hours to herself. Tyler was always underfoot. So, he didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I closed the folder and sat with that for a long while, Frank not rushing me, just letting an old man absorb something no grandfather should ever have to absorb. She hadn't done it out of meanness. She'd done it out of convenience, and somehow that landed even worse. "Does the boyfriend know about any of this?" I asked. "He knows about the kid," Frank said. "Been told Tyler's a handful, hard to manage. Never asked a single follow-up question, from what I can tell. A coward, I thought, same as the woman herself in a different way. 2 grown adults under a roof with an 8-year-old, and not one of them had bothered to ask a single question worth asking. And then there was my son, working himself thin on the road, trusting completely, seeing nothing. I paid for Frank's coffee, tucked that folder under my arm, and told him I needed everything documented, dates, locations, all of it airtight. Already on it, he said. I drove home with the windows cracked, March air still holding a little winter bite to it, and Tyler was back at my house by then, asleep in the guest room. Natural sleep this time, the real kind, helmet finally off and resting on the nightstand beside him. I stood in that doorway and watched him breathe for a minute before I went to my kitchen table, pulled out an old spiral notebook I used to log delivery routes in, and I started writing everything down. Dates, times, every word Dr. Whitfield had told me, every word from Frank's folder, all of it in order, in my own hand, the way I've always trusted things more, once I've written them down myself. I called Sam Ferris and left a message. We're ready to move forward. Then, I picked up the phone one more time and called my son, not to tell him everything, not that night, just to say, Marcus, I need you to come by the house tomorrow evening. There's something we need to talk about. Marcus showed up Friday around 6:30, pulled into my driveway in that company car he drives, walked up looking like a man, expecting a nice dinner and some grandfather stories. Jacket slung over one shoulder, relaxed. He had no idea what was waiting for him. Tyler was already asleep in the back bedroom. I'd made sure of that, because whatever was about to happen at my kitchen table was no place for an 8-year-old's ears. Not that night, and not for a long while, if I could help it. I'd made a pot roast, the same meal I used to cook for Marcus whenever life had knocked him down as a younger man, the year he lost his first job, the year he and his first serious girlfriend split up hard. I never told him it was a ritual. Some things you just do without explaining them. He came in, hugged me, said something smelled good, asked where Tyler was, sleeping already. I told him he's had a good couple days. Marcus smiled, said good. The boy needed it. He sat down, asked what was going on, said I'd sounded different on the phone. Eat first? I told him, and he gave me that look he's given me since he was about 12 years old. The one that says you're being strange, old man. But he picked up his fork anyway. We ate. I let him finish. Let him have his second helping and his sweet tea. Let him be comfortable one last time before I upended his whole life. Then I stood up, went to the counter, and set 3 things down in front of him. The medical report, the pharmacy records Sam had helped trace, Frank's folder. I sat back down and didn't say a single word. Let the evidence talk. I've always believed that. Marcus looked at me, then down at the papers, and picked up the medical report first. Slow. The way you handle something when part of you already suspects you don't want to know what it says. He read it. I watched his face go still, the way water goes still right before something breaks the surface. He set it down, picked up the pharmacy records, read those too, set them down without a word. Then he opened Frank's folder, and the photographs were right on top. He closed it after the first 2. My kitchen was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming behind me. Then Marcus stood up, slow and controlled, and said, "Excuse me a minute," and walked down the hall to the bathroom and shut the door. I sat at that table and waited. Take your time, son, I thought. Take all the time this deserves. He was in there a long while, long enough I refilled my tea twice, long enough the kitchen clock ticked through what felt like 10 full minutes. When he came back, his eyes were red-rimmed, but his voice came out steady. He sat down, looked at the folder, without touching it again. "Does Tyler know what was in the vitamins?" he asked. "No," I said. "He just knows it made his legs feel funny, and he didn't like it. That's all he told me." Marcus nodded once, slow. "Good. He doesn't need to know anything more than that." And right there I saw my son clear, not the blindfolded husband who'd filed his own boy's heavy eyes under growth spurt and gone back to his laptop, but the father, underneath all that travel and trust misplaced on the wrong person. He was still in there. He just needed somebody to hand him the truth straight. "How long have you known?" he asked me. "Since Tuesday." He looked up sharp. "You've been carrying this alone since Tuesday? Needed it airtight before I brought it to you, son. Didn't want to hand you something you could talk yourself out of." He was quiet a moment, then let out a short breath that was almost a laugh, humorless. "You built the whole case before you even showed me there was a problem." "Old habit," I told him. He looked at that folder one more time, then pushed it aside and pulled out his phone. "I need that lawyer's number," he said. "That's my son." Marcus didn't confront Renee that night, or the next day either. He spent the weekend at my place, sleeping in his old room down the hall. having breakfast with Tyler, watching him ride around the driveway in that new helmet, just watching him, storing it up the way you do when you know something's about to change for good. He spoke with Sam Ferris twice more that weekend, moved some money into a separate account Saturday morning, quietly photographed some documents from the home office Sunday while Renee was out, did everything careful and methodical, no wasted moves. He learned that from somewhere, I suppose. Monday morning, he waited until Tyler was at school. I drove him myself, walked him in, made sure he was safe and settled before anything else happened that day. Then Marcus drove to the house in Clark's Summit and sat down across from Renee at that same kitchen table where she used to post pictures for her page, Good Morning Light, coffee mugs arranged just so. He told me about it that evening, word for word, and I'll tell it to you the same way he told it to me. She was on her laptop when he walked in, looked up, smiled like it was any ordinary Monday. He sat across from her and slid the medical report over. She looked at it, then at him, and he watched that smile drain right off her face in real time. She started talking immediately. That was her mistake, going straight to explaining instead of asking what he already knew. Marcus, I can explain. He wasn't sleeping well, and He let the silence sit there, a good 10 seconds before he reached into the folder and set down the pharmacy records, then the photographs. She looked at the pictures of herself and Craig Halloran and went completely still. I trusted you, Marcus said, and his voice never rose once, not one time. With my son, with my house, with my name. You used all three of them. He stood up, picked up his keys. Marcus, please, Tyler is my son too. I love him. I would never. You drugged him, he said, still calm, still steady, for months, so you'd have more time, alone with another man. He walked toward the door. Whatever story you tell yourself about that from here on, that's yours to carry. It's not mine anymore. She called after him, asked if he was going to take Tyler from her. He stopped in the doorway, turned around one last time. You did that yourself, he said, not me, and he walked out. I want to tell you how it all ended, and I'm going to give you the real version, not the dramatic one, because real justice doesn't come with music playing behind it. It comes with paperwork and court dates and a long stretch of waiting, but it comes, friends, it does come. Full custody was awarded to Marcus about 10 weeks after he walked out that kitchen door. Renee's attorney tried to argue exhaustion, mental strain, difficult circumstances. Sam Ferris put Dr. Whitfield's testimony on the record, laid the toxicology results in front of the judge, laid 7 months of traced pharmacy purchases right there on the table, and the judge didn't need much more than that. Supervised visitation only, pending a full investigation by the county's Child Protective Services. Charges were filed by the district attorney's office for endangering the welfare of a child. Craig Halloran, when investigators reached out to him, cooperated fully and fast, gave them dates, locations, every conversation he could remember, handed Renee right over to protect himself without so much as a second thought. Coward served up one last dose of justice on his way out. The house in Clark's Summit sold as part of the divorce settlement, and Renee walked away with considerably less than the life she'd spent so many years curating. Her online page went quiet. The seasonal wreath on that front door stopped changing with the months. By the following winter, somebody else's mailbox sat at the end of that driveway. Not with an explosion, not with a scene, with paperwork, the way real things actually end. Tyler's doing well now, by the way, in case you were wondering, and I know some of you will be. He lives with Marcus full-time, and he stays with me most weekends still, and we've got a standing tradition of burgers at that same diner every other Saturday, helmet and all, though he's about outgrown it by now. He sleeps through the night these days. Good, natural sleep, the kind of boy his age is supposed to have. I think about that Tuesday afternoon often, how close I came to putting off that visit, how easy it would have been to wait until I felt 100%, until the weekend, until some other day that felt more convenient for me. I've learned there's no such thing as a convenient day to notice your grandchild is in trouble. You either see it when it's in front of you, or you don't, and I thank God every single day that I saw it. If this story meant something to you, friends, do an old man a favor and hit that like button. Leave me a comment and tell me where you're tuning in from tonight. And if you haven't subscribed yet, well, there's no time like the present. Until next time, take care of the little ones in your life. They're watching you closer than you think. And sometimes they're waiting on you to finally ask the right question. I'll see you on the next one.